It was a rainy Sunday evening in North Carolina, the kind of night when the world feels heavy with secrets. I remember sitting by the window, the old clock ticking behind me, when my daughter's words cut through the air like thunder. She said, "Mama, you're becoming a burden." Those words, I swear, they pierced deeper than any knife ever could. I had given her my youth, my strength, every ounce of love I had. I raised her on my own after her father passed. I worked long shifts at the diner, wiping sweat off my brow while serving strangers biscuits and coffee, just to make sure she had a roof over her head and shoes on her feet. And now she looked at me with eyes so cold as if I was nothing more than an extra weight dragging her down. I sat there that night, the rain tapping against the window pane, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Did I love her too much? Or not enough? You see, my daughter Emily wasn't always this way. Oh no, she was my sunshine. I remember the way she used to run into my arms after school, her little backpack bouncing behind her. She would curl up on my lap and say, "Mama, I'm going to take care of you forever." Those words used to melt my heart. I believed her. I built my whole future around them. But time changes people, and money, oh, money changes them even faster. It all started slowly. At first, she was just busy. You know how it goes? She got a job in the city, met new people, started dressing in clothes I couldn't even pronounce the brands of. And I was proud. Lord knows I was proud. But soon, phone calls became shorter, visits became rare, and when she did come by, she always looked distracted, tapping on that shiny phone of hers, eyes darting everywhere but me. Still, I told myself it was just the way of the world now. I held on to hope, whispering, "She'll remember who raised her. She'll come back to me." But then came that night, that Sunday evening when she stood in my living room, arms crossed, eyes sharp. She told me flat out that having me around was slowing her down, that I was holding her back from living her real life. And then she said it. Those words I will never forget. "Mama, you're just a burden." I thought my heart would stop right there. I sat in silence long after she left, the echo of the door slamming ringing in my ears. The old house felt emptier than ever. My rocking chair creaked under me, the quilt I had stitched with my own two hands falling heavy across my lap. I stared at the family photos on the mantel, those smiling faces frozen in time, and wondered if the woman I raised could really be the same little girl who once promised me forever. But let me tell you something, my dear listener. Life has a way of turning tides. Karma doesn't forget, and when the storm finally comes, it sweeps through with a power no one can outrun. Emily, my daughter, she thought she was untouchable. She thought her money, her friends, her fancy apartment in the city would keep her safe from life's lessons. But oh, she had no idea what was waiting for her. And that, my friends, is where my story truly begins. Because sometimes, the very people who call us a burden end up needing us more than anyone else. Lining in, and when that moment came for Emily, I was there, not because she deserved it, but because I was her mother. You know, before all the heartbreak, before those cruel words left her lips, there was nothing but love. Emily was my world, my little miracle. She came into my life when I was 27, just 2 years after I had lost my husband in that terrible car accident. Oh, how I remember that day, the day she was born. The doctor placed her tiny body into my arms, and she let out the faintest cry, no louder than a kitten's mew, her little fingers wrapped around my thumb, and in that moment I knew my life had a new purpose. I raised her in a small house just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. It wasn't much: peeling paint on the porch, a leaky faucet in the kitchen, and floors that creaked louder than an old fiddle. But it was home, our home, Every morning, I'd wake before the sun, pack her lunch, and walk her to the bus stop. She used to skip beside me, her braids bouncing, and sing little songs she made up on the spot. Sometimes they didn't even rhyme, but Lord, they were beautiful to me. After school, she'd run into the diner where I worked, sliding onto the last booth by the window, coloring in her little notebook while I rushed between tables, and every single night, no matter how tired I was, I'd read her a story before bed. She loved fairy tales. Oh, how her eyes lit up when I'd say, "Once upon a time." We didn't have much money, but I tried to make up for it with love. On Christmas mornings, I'd sew her little dresses, wrapping them in shiny paper so she thought Santa had visited. On her birthdays, I'd bake lopsided cakes with too much frosting, and she'd clap her hands, grinning ear to ear. She used to look up at me with those big brown eyes and say, "Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a big house so you never have to work again." And I believed her. I believed every word. Emily was a bright child, smart, curious, always asking questions. She had this hunger to see the world beyond our little town. I could see it in her even then. When she was in middle school, she begged me to let her join the debate team. I scraped together the money for the uniform, even though it meant eating beans and rice for a month. But when I watched her stand on that stage, her voice strong and confident, I thought, that's my girl. She's going to be somebody. But as much as she dreamed big, she never seemed ashamed of me. Not then. She'd introduce me to her friends with pride, saying, "This is my mama. She works harder than anyone I know." And I'd smile, hiding the ache in my feet from standing on diner floors 12 hours a day. We had a bond, an unshakable bond, or so I thought. I remember one night. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I had just come home from work, my apron still dusted with flour. She was waiting up for me, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a blanket draped over her shoulders. "Mama," she whispered, "do you ever get scared?" I sat beside her, brushing the hair from her face. "Scared of what, baby?" She hesitated, then said, "Scared that one day I'll leave and you'll be all alone." My heart twisted. I pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Oh, Emily, don't you worry about that. No matter where life takes you, you'll always come back to me. That's what daughters do." She smiled, her eyes heavy with sleep, and mumbled, "I'll never leave you, Mama. I promise." If only promises could last forever. Those years, those simple years of love and sacrifice, they built the foundation of my life. I thought nothing could break it. But little did I know, the cracks had already started forming, because as Emily grew older, the world began to whisper things into her ears, things about status, success, and money, and those whispers grew louder, drowning out the sound of a mother's love. And that, my dear listener, is where the storm started to brew. The bond we built, the one I thought was unshakable, would soon be tested in ways I could never have imagined. They say storms never arrive all at once. No, they creep in slowly, disguised as harmless clouds on the horizon. That's exactly how it began with Emily. At first, it was little things. She started visiting less often. Her phone calls, once filled with excitement and laughter, grew shorter. Sometimes she wouldn't call at all for weeks, and when I tried to reach her, it went straight to voicemail. "Oh, Mama, I've just been so busy," she'd say when she finally returned my call. I wanted to believe her. I told myself it was just her career, her new life in the city. But something deep inside me, something only a mother can feel, told me it was more than that. I remember the first Thanksgiving she missed. The table was set, my famous sweet potato casserole, green beans with bacon, the turkey roasted to perfection. I had even polished the old silverware her daddy and I bought when we first got married. I sat there waiting, the candles flickering, the clock ticking louder with each passing minute. 7 o'clock came, no Emily. 8 o'clock came, still no Emily. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text. Sorry, Mama, something came up. I'll make it next year. Love you. My heart sank. I looked at that empty chair, the one she had always sat in, and I swear the whole house felt colder. Christmas wasn't much different. She showed up late, gifts in hand, but her eyes were glued to that glowing phone of hers. While I poured her hot cocoa, she was laughing at messages from someone else. I tried to hold a conversation, to tell her about the neighbor's new puppy, about the roses I planted out front, but she nodded absent-mindedly, barely listening. When she finally left, I stood at the door watching her car disappear into the night, wondering if she even realized I was lonely. The first real cut came one spring afternoon. She called me out of the blue, her voice hurried. "Mama, I need a favor. Could you loan me some money just until my next paycheck?" Now, I didn't have much. Lord knows I barely scraped by with my diner wages and the small savings tucked away in a coffee tin under the sink. But she was my daughter. How could I say no? So I handed her what little I had, smiling through the ache in my chest, and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Mama will always help you." She hugged me, kissed my cheek, and promised to pay it back. But weeks turned into months, and the money never came back. When I gently asked about it, she brushed it off. "Oh, Mama, it's just money. Don't be so dramatic. Just money." But that money was food on my table. It was medicine for my aching joints. Little by little, Emily's words began to sting sharper. She started making comments like, "Mama, you don't understand how things work in the city," or "You wouldn't get it. You've never lived like I do." She'd roll her eyes when I didn't know the latest gadgets or trends, and each time I felt a little smaller, a little less like her mother, and more like some relic from a world she wanted to leave behind. One night, after she had come over for a quick dinner, she stood in my kitchen looking around. "Mama," she said, wrinkling her nose, "don't you think it's time you sold this old house? You could move into an apartment, something modern. This place is, well, outdated." I looked around the room she was criticizing, the same kitchen where I had cooked her birthday cakes, where we'd baked cookies on Christmas Eve, where she'd sat on the counter swinging her legs as a little girl. Outdated? To her, maybe. To me, it was a lifetime of memories. I forced a smile and said, "This house may be old, Emily, but it's full of love, and love never goes out of style." She just sighed, grabbed her purse, and muttered, "You'll never understand, Mama." That night, when the door closed behind her, I sat at the kitchen table long after the dishes were cleared, staring at the faded wallpaper and chipped cabinets. For the first time, I felt like I was losing her. But the moment that truly shattered me came a few weeks later. I had gone into the city to surprise her. I baked her favorite peach cobbler, packed it carefully in a tin, and rode 2 buses just to reach her new apartment. When she opened the door, her face froze. "Mama, what are you doing here?" Her tone wasn't joyful. It was sharp, embarrassed. I held up the tin, smiling nervously. "I thought I'd bring you a little something, your favorite." But instead of hugging me, she glanced behind her. That's when I saw him, a man in a tailored suit, sitting on her couch, sipping wine. Emily stepped outside, closing the door halfway behind her, and whispered, "Mama, you can't just show up unannounced like this. It's not appropriate." My hands trembled as I held out the tin. "I just wanted to see you, baby, that's all." She sighed, took the cobbler without even looking at me, and said, "I'll call you later, okay?" Then she closed the door. Long silence, voice breaking. I stood there in that hallway, the hum of the elevator echoing in the distance, tears blurring my vision. I had never felt so small, so unwanted, and that was the night I realized the little girl who once promised to take care of me forever was slipping away. But I tell you this, my friend, life has a way of balancing the scales. Those small betrayals, those dismissive words, they were just the beginning. Because what came next would break me in ways I didn't think I could survive, and it would test the very core of what it means to be a mother. They say a wound heals if you stop picking at it. But what happens when the wound keeps getting cut open, deeper, sharper, day after day? That was my life with Emily during those years. The little slights, the missed holidays, the rolled eyes, those were just scratches. But soon, her words, her actions, they became daggers. I remember the night she told me I was holding her back. It was late summer, cicadas humming outside, the air heavy with heat. She had come over after work, wearing one of those sleek dresses that cost more than my monthly groceries. She looked beautiful, polished, successful, every inch the woman she wanted to be. I set the table with her favorite meal, fried chicken, mashed potatoes with extra butter, and collard greens, just the way she liked. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could reconnect. But halfway through dinner, she set down her fork, leaned back, and said, "Mama, I can't keep coming out here all the time. You don't understand. You're holding me back. My friends, my coworkers, they don't live like this. They don't understand why I waste so much time with you. Waste time with me." The words echoed in my ears. I tried to smile, to brush it off. "Well, sweetheart, I just thought," but she cut me off, waving her manicured hand. "You thought wrong. I'm building a life, Mama, a big life, and you're just stuck." I sat there, staring at the woman across from me, wondering where my little girl had gone. A few weeks later, she came again. But this time, it wasn't to share a meal. She walked in briskly, her heels clicking against the wooden floor, her perfume filling the room. She didn't even sit down. "Mama," she said sharply, "we need to talk about the future." I tilted my head, nervous. "What do you mean?" She crossed her arms. "You can't keep living like this forever, alone in this old house. You're getting older. You need to think about retirement communities, assisted living, something." My chest tightened. "Emily, this is my home, the home your father and I built, the home I raised you in." She sighed loudly. "It's not practical anymore. You're too stubborn to see it. You need help, and I don't have the time." Her words stung, but the way she said, "I don't have the time," that cut the deepest. I wanted to scream, to remind her of all the nights I stayed up rocking her to sleep, all the double shifts I worked to put food on the table. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, tears burning behind my eyes. Things only grew worse from there. She stopped visiting altogether, except when she needed something: money, advice, a ride when her car broke down. Each time I gave without question. Each time I told myself, maybe this time she'll remember who I am. But she never did. The breaking point came one winter evening. The snow was falling hard, blanketing the streets in silence. I had baked a loaf of bread, planning to surprise her with it the next day. But then the phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was cold, clipped. "Mama, I need you to stop calling me so much. It's embarrassing. My friends don't understand why I still talk to you every day. They say it makes me look dependent." I gripped the receiver so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Emily, I just worry about you. That's all. She cut me off. "Stop. Please, I can't keep doing this. You're smothering me. And honestly, it feels like you're becoming a burden." There it was, the word I had feared all along, burden. I stood there, the bread cooling on the counter, my heart breaking into pieces. After that night, something inside me shifted. I stopped calling. I stopped reaching out. I told myself if she didn't want me, then I'd stop trying. But do you know what happens when a mother stops reaching out? The silence becomes deafening. The days stretched into weeks, the weeks into months. My home, once filled with laughter and warmth, grew colder with every passing season. The ticking of the clock became my only companion. Yet despite everything, I still loved her. Every birthday, I sent her a card with $20 tucked inside, even though she never called to thank me. Every Christmas, I wrapped a gift and left it by the tree, even though she never came to open it, because no matter how cruel her words became, she was still my daughter. And love, real love, doesn't just vanish. But oh, my dear listener, I would soon learn that even the deepest love has limits, because what Emily did next wasn't just careless, it wasn't just selfish, it was betrayal, pure, heart-wrenching betrayal, and it would push me to the edge of despair. They say pain doesn't kill you, but it changes you. Piece by piece, it wears you down until the person staring back at you in the mirror feels like a stranger. That was me. The winter Emily betrayed me. It began innocently, the way storms often do. Just a few clouds on the horizon. She came to visit one chilly evening, her hair swept up, her coat stylish and sharp. She carried herself with confidence, her heels striking the floor like a warning bell. I felt that flutter of hope again, foolish as it was. Maybe, I thought, she had come just to see me, just to sit, just to talk. But no, she stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, and said flatly, "Mama, I need money." Again. It wasn't the first time. Over the years, she had come to me for help more times than I could count, and every time I had given her what I could. But this time was different. She wasn't asking, she was demanding. I looked at her, my heart heavy. "Emily, honey, I don't have much left. I'm trying to stretch my savings, make sure the bills are paid." She rolled her eyes. "Mama, stop. You always have excuses. You've got that house, you've got land, you could sell it if you wanted to." Her words hit me like a slap. Sell my home, the home her father and I had built with our bare hands? I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. "Emily, that's not just a house. That's our life, our memories. It's all I have left of your daddy." But she didn't soften. She didn't even blink. She leaned in, her voice sharp as glass. "You're being selfish. If you loved me, you'd help me. Why should I struggle while you sit here in this old house, clinging to the past?" Selfish. She called me selfish. After all the nights I went hungry so she could eat. After all the hours I worked so she could have shoes on her feet. After all the dreams I gave up so she could chase hers. Selfish. The word cut deeper than any knife. But the betrayal didn't end there. A week later, I got a call from the bank. A call that shattered what little peace I had left. Someone had tried to access my account. My account, the small savings I had left, tucked away for medicine, for groceries, for the little emergencies life always throws. At first, I thought it must be a mistake. But then, they said the name, Emily, my daughter. She had used my information, my trust, to try to take what little I had. I sat in my kitchen, the phone heavy in my hand, my body shaking. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It wasn't just cruel words. It was theft. It was abandonment. It was my own flesh and blood turning against me. And in that moment, I broke. I wept harder than I ever had before. I wept until my chest hurt, until my breath came in gasps. The house seemed to close in around me, the silence pressing down like a weight. For the first time in my life, I felt truly, utterly alone. Days blurred together after that. I stopped baking. I stopped tending to the garden. Even the rocking chair sat empty, dust gathering on its arms. I felt like a ghost in my own home. The neighbors would wave when they passed, but I didn't wave back. The phone would ring, but I let it go unanswered. The world kept moving, but I was frozen in place. It was as if my heart had been locked away in a dark room, and the key had been thrown away. And yet, as broken as I was, a small part of me still clung to hope, because hope, it's the cruelest companion. It whispers, maybe she'll change. Maybe tomorrow she'll come back. Maybe she'll apologize. But tomorrow never came. The lowest moment of all came one cold, gray afternoon. I had gone into town for groceries. As I walked past the cafe on Main Street, I saw her, my Emily. She was sitting by the window, laughing, her hand resting on the arm of a man in a fine suit. Her smile was wide, her eyes bright, And I froze because she looked happy, happier than I had seen her in years. Not once did she glance outside and see me standing there in the cold. Not once did she think to wave, to invite me in. I stood there for what felt like hours, the snow falling softly around me, my bags heavy in my hands. Finally, I turned and walked away. And as I did, the truth hit me like a hammer. She didn't need me anymore. She didn't want me anymore. To her, I was just a shadow, a burden, something to be cast aside. That was the day I gave up. I went home, closed the door, and sat in silence. For days, for weeks, my heart was empty. My spirit was gone. I had reached rock bottom. But here's the thing about rock bottom. When you're down there, when there's nothing left to lose, that's when something incredible can happen. That's when the world shifts. That's when fate, or maybe karma, begins to stir. And though I didn't know it then, Emily's choices were about to catch up to her, because life has a way of balancing the scales. And soon, very soon, the daughter who thought she had it all would come face to face with the consequences of her actions. And when she did, I would be there to see it. When you've been hurt as deeply as I was, you start to think maybe justice doesn't exist. I remember lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling beams in my little bedroom, whispering into the darkness, "Lord, will she ever understand? Will she ever see what she's done?" And for a long time, it felt like the answer was silence. But then the silence began to shift. It started with whispers around town. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Folks like to gossip, and I was too tired to listen. But little by little, the pieces began to form a picture. Emily's new business deal, the one she had been boasting about for months, wasn't going so well. Her partner, that man in the fine suit I'd seen her with, had a reputation for being slippery. And sure enough, rumors swirled that he'd skipped town with more than just his own share of money. I heard it in the grocery store when two women leaned over their carts and whispered, "Did you hear about Emily Harper? That investment of hers went belly up, lost almost everything, lost everything." I gripped the handle of my cart tighter, my heart pounding. For a moment I felt guilty. A mother should never feel relief at her child's pain. But deep down, I couldn't help but think, was this karma? The weeks rolled on, and the signs became clearer. Emily stopped coming around town in her sharp heels and tailored coats. Instead, she walked quickly, head down, wearing plain clothes that didn't quite fit. The brightness in her eyes dimmed. The confidence in her stride wavered. I saw her one Sunday, slipping into church late and sitting in the very back pew. She kept her head bowed, never once looking my way. And my heart, oh, my heart twisted, because even though she had hurt me, even though she had betrayed me, seeing her like that, broken, ashamed, it tugged at the part of me that still longed to hold her, to fix everything. But I stayed in my seat, silent, waiting. Because sometimes love means stepping back. Sometimes it means letting life teach the lesson you can't. And life taught her hard. One bitter January morning, I heard the sound of tires crunching on the frozen driveway. I peeked out the window, and there she was, Emily, standing by a car that had clearly seen better days. Her hair was unkempt, her coat thin against the biting wind. She hesitated at the porch, her hand trembling as she raised it to knock. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to fling the door open, wrap her in a blanket and say, "Welcome home, baby." But another part of me, the part that remembered the bank call, the cafe window, the word selfish, held me back. So I waited. The knock finally came, soft, hesitant. I opened the door slowly. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, they weren't sharp or dismissive. They were glassy, desperate, like the eyes of a lost child. "Mama," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I need help." Those words, they were the very words I had once longed to hear, but not like this, not hollow, not after everything. I stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. She shuffled past me, her shoulders slumped. In the living room, she sat on the very edge of the sofa, her hands twisting in her lap. I sat across from her, waiting. Finally, she spoke. "Mama, I lost everything. The business, the apartment, even the car's about to be taken. I don't know where to go." Her voice broke into sobs, the sound raw and unpolished. And I sat there, my heart caught between sorrow and justice, because this was it. This was Karma. The very daughter who once told me I was too much of a burden to keep, now had nowhere else to turn but me. And yet, even as I listened, I couldn't bring myself to lash out. I didn't say "I told you so." I didn't remind her of the name she'd called me, or the tears she'd caused. Instead, I asked one simple question: "Emily, why me?" She froze, her sobs halting. "Why come to me when I was the one you left behind?" Her lip trembled, her eyes darted away, and then finally she whispered the truth: "Because you're the only one left who still loves me." Those words, they cut through me like nothing else, because they were true. Despite it all, despite the betrayal, the theft, the abandonment, my love hadn't died. It had been bruised, broken, buried under hurt, but it was still there, flickering like a stubborn flame that refused to go out. And Karma, cruel as it was, had brought her back to me. The days that followed were hard. Emily stayed in the spare room, the same room she'd slept in as a girl. But this time, she wasn't surrounded by dolls and posters. This time, she was surrounded by regret. I watched her struggle, not just with money, but with pride. She washed dishes with her head low. She helped mend the garden fence without complaint. She even joined me in the kitchen, her hands awkward with a rolling pin she hadn't touched in years. And slowly, slowly, I began to see glimpses of the daughter I once knew. The little girl who used to beg for cookies fresh from the oven, the teenager who used to twirl in front of the mirror, showing off a dress before prom, the woman I had prayed she would one day become. But Karma wasn't done yet, because just as Emily began to settle, just as the ice between us began to thaw, life threw her another storm. One evening, as we sat by the fire, she opened a letter with trembling hands. It was from the bank. Her debts weren't just large, they were crushing, and now collectors were circling. She dropped the paper to the floor, her face pale. "Mama," she whispered, "I don't know what to do." And in that moment, I realized Karma had one final lesson for her. This wasn't just about losing money or pride. It was about facing the consequences of every choice she had made. And this time, I couldn't save her. She would have to save herself. But here's the thing about Karma. It doesn't just punish, it teaches. And though Emily's journey through the fire wasn't over, I could see the first sparks of change in her eyes. For the first time in years, she wasn't blaming me. She wasn't blaming anyone else. She was finally beginning to look inward. And that gave me hope. The winter stretched on, colder than I could remember in years. Snow piled against the porch steps, and the chimney smoked day and night. Inside, the air was warmer, but the weight of silence still pressed down on us. Emily tried to keep herself busy. She cleaned, she cooked, she even shoveled snow from the driveway without me asking. It was strange seeing her hands once so manicured and polished, blistered from the work. But no matter how much she did, I could see the storm swirling behind her eyes. The debts, they weren't just numbers on a page, they were chains around her neck. Every letter that came in the mail added another shackle, another weight pressing her down. I found her one morning at the kitchen table, head buried in her hands, the papers spread out before her like broken glass. Her shoulders shook with sobs she was trying to stifle. I placed a cup of coffee beside her. She didn't even look up. "Mama," she whispered, her voice raw, I think I've ruined my life. Hearing your child say that, it does something to you. Part of me wanted to grab those papers, tear them into shreds, and tell her we'd find a way together, but another part of me knew this was her mountain to climb. So I sat across from her, folded my hands and said, "Baby, maybe this is the moment you start rebuilding, not from the money, but from yourself." Her eyes lifted, swollen and red. For a second, I saw a spark of that little girl who once told me she'd take care of me forever. But the spark flickered, dimmed. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she said. The breaking point came not long after. It was a Thursday night, late, too late. I woke to the sound of footsteps on the porch. My heart raced. At my age, you don't take kindly to surprises in the middle of the night. I grabbed my robe, shuffled to the door, and there she was, Emily, but not the Emily I remembered. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. Her hands shook as she held a crumpled piece of paper. They're coming after me, Mama," she stammered. "If I don't pay by tomorrow, I'll lose everything left, even my name." Her knees buckled. She sank right there onto the porch, sobbing into the wood. I knelt beside her, the cold air burning my lungs, and for the first time in years, I pulled her into my arms. She clung to me like a child, crying into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mama," she choked out. "I was so blind. I thought I didn't need anyone. I thought money would make me strong. But I've lost it all. I've lost me." My tears mingled with hers. I stroked her hair the way I used to when she had nightmares as a little girl. "It's never too late, baby," I whispered. "Never too late to find yourself again." The next day, she made a choice. For the first time in her life, Emily didn't try to hide. She marched down to the bank, her hands trembling but her chin lifted high, and she faced the men who held her debts. I went with her, not to speak, but to stand at her side, and I watched as my daughter, the same girl who once called me a burden, admitted her failures out loud. She didn't beg, she didn't lash out, she didn't make excuses. She owned every mistake, and though the consequences were harsh, bankruptcy, repossession, the loss of her reputation, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw humility. I saw strength. I saw my daughter breaking free from the chains she had wrapped around herself. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Emily took on odd jobs around town, cleaning, babysitting, even stocking shelves at the grocery store. People whispered, of course they did. Some snickered, some judged, but Emily kept her head down and worked. And little by little, the whispers faded, because work has a way of silencing gossip. One evening, as we sat together by the fire, she turned to me and said, "Mama, I don't deserve your love after all I've done." I looked at her, at the tired lines on her young face, at the calluses on her once soft hands, and I felt my heart ache with a bittersweet joy. "Child," I said, "you don't earn a mother's love. You just have it, always." Tears filled her eyes. This time she didn't look away. That was the turning point. Not the bankruptcy, not the repossession, not even the odd jobs. It was that moment by the fire when Emily finally understood love. Not the kind you buy, not the kind that flatters, but the kind that endures. And though she had a long road ahead, I knew she was finally walking it with her eyes open. Funny thing about life, sometimes you have to lose everything to find what matters most. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted into streams that trickled down the hills, and the first flowers peeked up shyly from the thawed earth. The world was waking up, shaking off its cold misery, and in many ways, so was Emily. She had changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but in the quiet, steady ways that matter most. She started volunteering at the church pantry, stacking cans and handing out bread with a humble smile. She didn't do it for recognition. In fact, she often tried to slip in and out unnoticed. But the people who received her kindness, they noticed. One old man with a patched coat and weary eyes clasped her hand and whispered, "Bless you, child." I saw her blink back tears. It wasn't money, it wasn't status, but it was something she hadn't felt in years, the weight of being needed for good. At home, the distance between us shrank. She no longer avoided the kitchen. Instead, she lingered there, chopping vegetables beside me, asking about old recipes, laughing at memories I thought she'd forgotten. One night, as I pulled a pie from the oven, she grinned and said, "You know, Mama, I used to tell my friends your pies could fix any broken heart." I chuckled, shaking my head. "And what about yours? Did it?" Her smile faltered, then softened. She reached across the counter, taking my flour-dusted hand. "It is now. I cannot describe what it feels like to have your child come back to you, not just into your house, but into your heart again." The bitterness began to fade, replaced by something gentler. Forgiveness is never quick, never easy, but step by step, we were finding it. Still, karma wasn't quite finished. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch rocking in the spring breeze, Emily opened a letter. It was from an old friend of hers, one who had once stood by during her rise, then turned away when she fell. The friend wanted to reconnect, said she missed the good old days. Emily read the letter twice, then folded it carefully. "Mama," she said quietly, "I don't think I want those days back. They weren't really good at all." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I saw peace in her eyes. That's when I knew the lesson had taken root. Months passed. The debts didn't disappear overnight. The hard work didn't magically turn into riches. But Emily found purpose in simpler things. She planted flowers in the yard again, her hands in the dirt, her laughter echoing through the air. She joined me at church, not to hide, but to sing. And on quiet evenings, she'd sit with me by the fire, her head resting on my shoulder, just as she did when she was a child. One night, as the crickets chirped outside, she said softly, "Mama, I thought I lost everything, but maybe what I lost was what I never needed." I kissed the top of her head, whispering, "Sometimes, baby, losing is the only way to win." And so here I am, telling you this story, not because it's easy to relive, but because it matters. Children, money, pride, all of it can blind us. We forget the people who carried us, who sacrificed for us, who loved us when we were nothing. But life has a way of stripping away illusions. It humbles the proud, it tests the broken, and it reminds us, often painfully, of what really matters. Emily called me a burden once. Those words nearly crushed me. But now, as she helps me into my chair, as she brings me tea with a gentle smile, as she tells me she loves me every single day, I realize something. I was never the burden. The burden was her pride, her greed, her blindness, and when she laid those burdens down, she found her way back to me. So if you're listening right now, wondering if someone you love has turned their back for good, hold on, because sometimes the people who wound us the deepest are the very ones life will bring back into our arms, not the same as before, but humbled, changed, ready to love in the way they were always meant to. Money can vanish, status can crumble, pride can destroy, but a mother's love endures. And no matter how far a child strays, sometimes karma is the path that leads them home.